Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd first, it's been another 40 minutes since we had the last stand-up. I'd ask you all to stand up for me. We're going to do a little quick exercise. Don't talk to your neighbors this time. That's a little too much. So my name is Justin Jameson. I'm here to talk to you guys about the future of work, and I'm going to ask you a few questions to start. If it pertains to you, you can sit back down. At the end, you will all be sitting. Nobody's going to stand for the rest of the presentation. So the question is, do you believe that you are working when you reply to emails at vacation? If you do, then you can sit down. Do you believe that you're working when you attend a conference call at home while you're sitting in your pajamas? Do you believe that you're working when you're volunteering for free? And how about when you're here today? Are you working? So this is perfect because everybody still remaining standing is perfect candidate to come to the workshop later this afternoon. Now you can all sit down. Thank you very much. So as you can see, everybody here, is sitting at different times. And really the question is then, what is work? And the first thing you look at is the dictionary. And we kind of found that it really means to do or produce something, some sort of statement of work. It's also kind of a means of livelihood. I mean, you guys are all working and producing, and that's why you're able to be here today. And we wanted to add to that being kind of more of a social aspect, an integration into society, and kind of connecting with people that you're working with. And so we started looking at this from a macro level, and it's clear that, at least for me, before I came to IMD, I was working more hours than I ever had been before. And generally speaking, there's higher productivity. And so what does that mean? That means higher output, higher GDP. I think everybody has seen over the past 50 years, GDPs just keep going. And so the question is, where does that output go? And there's two options. Well, there's more than two options, but I'm going to talk about two options. The first one is increased consumption. You can just absorb that output and consume more, kind of with the US model. And the second one is to kind of limit the working hours, so you cut back on that output, and again, you kind of balance the equation. And so that's the macro level view of kind of what's happening in work, but we're going to take it now a little bit more micro and look here at specific trends. Here's the average weekly working hours by employee in the OECD. And as you can see, it's decreasing a little bit, but staying relatively stable now and into the future. I mean, it's again decreasing, and that's because there's multiple forces that are interacting to kind of change this. In this specific case, there's technology and increased consumption. Technology is trying to bring it down, and increased consumption is trying to keep the amount of hours that you're all working up. And it's really important that you take into consideration all the factors. This is just two. There are more. We'll discuss that later. But in the past, this is John Maynard Keynes. In 1930, he said that in the year 2030, 100 years later, we would only need to work 15 hours a day, or excuse me, it's way too much, 15 hours a week, because the technology would make it so that we didn't need to. But what he didn't take into consideration is the increased consumption that would absorb all the output. And so that's why we're seeing that the trend really hasn't come down too much over the past few years. So there's the 15 hours. So over the past 50 years, every decade, we've seen a change in the business environment and culture going through. And today, going into the future, the only real constant that you guys are going to face now and into the future is change. That we all know that, we all understand that change is where it's going, change is where it's been. And so we've developed a framework here, as you've seen multiple frameworks today. This one is to help you deal with that change in work going to the future. And so this has four different aspects: the employee, the employer, the work environment, where they are, what they're doing, how they feel connected to the company, and the society and government around that kind of integrates everything together. And these four are kind of integrated with three megatrends that we found during our research, which is the demographic change, which you just heard about, cultural mindsets on work, and obviously a change in technology going into the future. And so I'd like to take a specific look now at how all of this is impacted by one change which probably a lot of you have seen or at least know about, which is automation. So there's impacts and opportunities that come along with automation. And I'll show you one here. For the employer, you're replacing your workers by machines. They're more productive, you're saving money, you're more effective. But what do you do with the employees you have? You have now the opportunity to take them and redeploy them, re-educate them into areas where you can actually grow your business instead, increase the top line instead of cutting the bottom line. And again, for the employee, for the society and government, and for the work environment, they all have both impacts and opportunities that you can use in the future of your business. And so we're, to look at this, and you've seen many processes today, we developed a similar process as you've seen before. You look at the key trends that are out there. Here's the 3 main ones. The implications from those trends, and from that you build scenarios. You've got the base case all the way to an extreme case where it's completely different than what you would ever imagine. And from that then you have to develop obviously the business opportunities and figure out what you can do to take advantage of the future. And so as you see up in the top corner, you can follow along with what step we're at, the top right corner. Now we'll talk about the trends that we'll look about. So again, the technology, demographics, and cultural mindset, the 3 mega trends. And what we've done is taken a look at what we expect the future to look like on a timeline, what's happening now, and what's going to come into the future. And we looked at 20 specific trends, which we won't go over now, that's too many, but in the workshop, you will have the ability to work with all of them. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Carmen to talk more specifically about employee monitoring.
Thank you. So to discuss employee monitoring, we're going to start by looking at an example from the sports world. I swam competitively for many years, and during that time frame, my day-to-day activities were monitored to make sure that on the day of a big event, I was sure to outperform myself. My workouts were scheduled very strictly. All of my competitions were recorded for further analysis. Recovery was also scheduled into my timeline. And finally, I had to make sure I ate proper food. And that makes me wonder, why hasn't business done the same thing? Why isn't business following this trend? Surely all of you top executives could benefit from knowing that on the day of a big and important meeting or negotiation, you are at your top performance. More and more, we will see companies adopting this trend of monitoring their employees. Employees will be required to sleep more, to eat healthier, much healthier than athletes maybe, to exercise, and also all in all to avoid unhealthy behavior. Now we've seen quite a few companies have already started doing this. PayPal, for example, has given these monitoring bracelets, which you've probably all seen, to selected employees as a reward. The oil and gas industry submits their employees to drug and alcohol testing when working on platforms. And we have many other examples. Last week, we were in Brazil. We visited a production facility. And there, during each shift, the employees take a 15-minute break to do a stretching routine. So now that we understand this trend, what are the implications of this trend on you in your work? Well, as an employee, this will increase your quality of life as you're being monitored and coached by your company. It will also act as a social differentiator, the way the BlackBerry did at the beginning. One risk, though, is that the already quite blurry boundary between work and life might become even more blurred. Now, how about the impact of employee monitoring as you as an employer? This will act as a good brand image for you, because as being known as monitoring your employees, people will know you care about your employees, about their well-being and their health. Also, it will increase the productivity of your organization as every individual is more productive. This does come at a high cost of investment, and not all companies will be willing and ready to absorb these costs, especially companies who focus more on temporary or short-term employees. How about your work environment? How will this change? We see a change in the bond between employee and employer. In some cases, this bond will become even stronger if the employee sees this as a benefit for his or her life. In other cases, though, this could be perceived as a breach of trust and weaken the bond. Also, we will see a divide in the workforce between, on one side, employees who are being monitored, and on the other, employees who are not being monitored. Finally, this trend also has implications in our society. The companies will become much more transparent, and as individuals live healthier lifestyles, the cost of healthcare will also go down. However, the risk that we saw before for the work environment, the divide in the workforce, would also be seen on a societal level. Now we looked at all of the trends, of all of the implications for one trend. But like Justin told us before, looking at only one trend is dangerous because we might predict a very wrong future. This is why we're going to go through a second trend, open talent economy, which Fabian will now show you.
In an open talent economy, instead of hiring people, companies post specific tasks on a platform. Individuals, talents, or a group of virtual group, even of freelancers, commit to finish and complete some of the tasks. The payment will not be done based on the time spent to fulfill and finish the task, but will be rather paid based on the result you achieve it. Similarly, we can see that quite often freelancers will serve several clients at the same time, making them act like in an entrepreneurial way. We see that already today. We have the examples of Odesk, Amazon Mechanical Turk. These two already today provide a platform where companies can post their units of work, freelancers can access, fulfill, and get paid directly. So how does this trend go together with the trend of monitoring, which we have seen before? We will use the same framework as before again. In terms of employer, we have been talking about the long-term work relationship before. Now suddenly it's a very short-term relationship. In an extreme case, that might be 20 minutes until the task is done. As we have seen being coached for the monitoring part, now it's very much, you sit on your home, you do your work, you finish it, that's it. We talked about an increase of transparency. We talk about the highly decrease in transparency because nobody knows really anymore who is working for whom. The government doesn't even know where to claim for taxes, which might be a good thing. In terms of the work environment, we were living to work before. Now suddenly we work just to live. That means I fulfill as many tasks as I need in order to pay my dinner and go out in the evening. So these implications seem to contradict each other. Now let's put it together into one scenario. And based on that scenario, let's have a look what are the business implications. That means how this scenario will change the future industry or landscape of industries. If we talk about the transparency, we are pretty sure that this will foster the whole industry of data monitoring, data transparency. If we talk about the change of work environment, meaning the work environment dictates your personal life, there will be an increase in demand for personal coaches. Talking about long-term versus short-term, there might be some consultants here as well. That's the perfect matter where they talk about. If you focus on short-term, they will tell you to focus on long-term. Finally, also if you talk about being coached and coaching, you gather data, you store it. It's a topic of cybersecurity. And this relates then to the talk we will have at 7 tonight with Mr. Kudelski. He will talk about that emerging industry exactly. So, is this how we predict the future to be in 2030? No. We were considering two trends until now. And we said, Mr. Keynes at the beginning also said, he was only looking at one trend. So we were looking at two trends. We need even more. For sure, it's better, but we need more. In order to do that, we need you. We need you to participate in our workshop. What will happen in the workshop is exactly what we did here. We will talk about trends. You will select the trends you think they matter tomorrow. We talk about the implication. Together we come up with a scenario which will make us deriving the business opportunities, so really the potential new businesses we can go into. Looking forward to meet you.